Hi, Zoya. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Really appreciate you taking the time to speak about a topic that I don't know a lot about. Typically, I have a point of view when it comes to the conversations with guests because it's very specific to either athletic performance or the business side of sport or sometimes in the mindset. So I connect it to conversations I'm having on a daily basis or things that I'm reading about. But in this case, we're going to be talking about young or families, young athletes, and time management. So I'm no longer young and I am not a parent. The role that I'll be playing today is, which is me in real life, is the single fun uncle. So I'm here to learn, and then hopefully also my siblings can take something away from this, even though their kids aren't yet of the age of typically the families we'll be speaking to. But I think there'll be a lot to take away from the discussions. So people might also be thinking, why is he wearing this polo shirt? Normally it's some kind of a hockey jersey or a football jersey. This is Mike's single fun uncle shirt, so I can be in character
Yeah,
for the episode.
love it.
So before we get into your background and then speak to the various topics around, what you see as trends, the parental home team, and then habits from an advice perspective, and finally what's behind the data, all with this with a spin on the data perspective. Just want to give the audience just one sentence on the ideal outcome for today, so they'll know what to expect. And so, like I mentioned, we're going to have a data point of view on this topic of how sports families and young athletes have an unfair advantage when it comes to learning time literacy. And as we'll also learn, this is a skill for life. And me as an adult, I can always improve on my time skills. So again, I'll be learning here. So does that sound cool to you?
That sounds great. Let's do it.
Great. So before we get into your expertise, your experience, can you give us or start with like your background? Because like that's from banking, which is not really
Yeah.
the topic today. So can you just give folks a sense of like how you came about the business in terms of Orgo, and then just going back into in terms of your career and some of the lessons you might have learned there that might have been useful, just to help set the stage so people get more of a sense of your point of view and where you're coming from.
Amazing. Thanks again for having me. I'd love to do that. So, spend 20 years in financial services and banking, which not at all is related to sports per se, but technology is the underlying kind of common thread amongst today and my background from yesteryear. My degrees in computer science and information technology. I've been, a techie ever since, actually second generation techie by that. I followed my mom's footsteps, and I'll talk about a little bit of the personal past because there's a lot of data surrounding that, but I was very intentional about that path in tech. I would oversee large enterprise tech teams, would oversee large, online banking platforms and such. And so that was data inherently within. Certainly, there are internal teams that I would lead, external and enterprise level systems, and data was at the heart of it. Had a very unique appreciation for all things data. I voted myself off the island, as I like to say, 2 years ago when I decided to have an existential crisis at the 20th mark of my career, asking what was next, but B, experiencing major FOMO around the tech space. And that is where exactly AI was really kind of coming up in its prime. Web3, DeFi, all those wonderful things that I was not able to touch because I was sitting in a highly bright
Yeah.
environment. And I'm like, you know what? What's the next 20 going to be? Let's do something. Let's put these skills to the test. So, vote myself off the island before I can even ask what was next. The very problem worthy of my pursuit asserted itself from my own home. And that gets back to the problem at hand here. I've got three athletes. Their ages 14, 10, and 7, and they're all girls. So, we'll pause on that. No hockey family, but one similar logistically to that is swimming. So we've got three swimmers in the home. They're swimming year round competitively. They're doing club soccer, club lacrosse. They're traveling for all these different teams. There's no seasonality, as we know. So all of this is happening at the same time, like year round. And then we try to wedge in a little bit of fun with like field hockey and track and dance and kind of keep them really rounded. Fast forward, we're a high performing family. We sign up for all these different things. We say yes, they say yes, we love it, until logistics of youth sports and all of the scheduling that we said yes to had started to have such a negative impact on the quality of our life and also kind of our experience at large. And so I kind of started to take a step back. This again was 2 years ago. And I'm like, why does this feel so painful? Like, this hurts. I have anxiety each time that I'm about to embark on an evening. I'm observing anxiety that the kids have around the weekend coming up. And so I started to dig in. I'm like, they love this sport. They're not saying no to that, but something about everything prior to it is starting to feel full of friction. Why? Ultimately came down to I don't have the tools and the clarity in the day to kind of, I don't know, execute with precision in the way that I would in the workplace. And so it came down to, okay, what questions am I trying to ask? Those are the ones that are what time do I have to start preparing? What time do I have to start driving? Who do I bring people? At what time and what place and so forth. And they seem so basic, but they were really hard to answer because of all of the stack of a schedule that we had. Long story short, the vision for Orgo, Organization on the Go, was born. And that's in an effort to, in fact, see the day clearly with confidence and control, but also start to import all of the scheduling data that lives disparately within the ecosystem today. So we can get into a lot more of like the nooks and the crannies, but
Yeah.
it's about a very personal pain point that's been experienced in an enterprise skill set that's been applied against it.
There's a lot of things you said there I wanted to touch on. But what I love about the overarching theme is you started with like a pain point you and your family personally had. So you understood and understand it very well and very deeply, the nuance of it. And instead of jumping on a trend of saying, hey, I can use AI, let me just build something because that's what everybody's doing. No offense to those folks. But in my experience, like 13, 14 years in B2B data,
Mm,
I've learned and seen across industries, across use cases, across geographies, those who know the problem very deeply are usually best suited to help solve for it. And so I'm excited to talk to you from that perspective because the banking, I believe, is also going to be useful, as you alluded
yeah.
to. I've done some work with like fintech space, financial services in general, and there's so much data. There is so much technology, very, very complex in terms of solving various use cases. Before we get into the topics of like the trends that you're seeing in general, also just wanted to comment because I've had this conversation with friends who have young kids. I have had this conversations with former teammates, former classmates that I played college with or in high school with, where there is just so much more travel sports now. My brother and I played pretty competitively growing up. We did the travel teams, but it seems in hindsight, pretty simple to what it is today. And this is where
Mhm.
I talked to some of these teammates that like are coaching and they go do scouting. I was like, where did this all come from? How? And I couldn't even imagine how are the parents dealing with it because like for ice hockey, sometimes it's 5 in the morning practice, 6 in the morning practice, or you have long weekends. From what I've heard about swimming, it's typically also very early. And
Similar.
yeah, and very intensive. So, have you seen? So, you said your kids are like in the teens to preteen, we'll call it. Have you noticed? I mean, this is a nice segue into the trends. Like, have you noticed the trend of there just being more accelerating, or is this just my like again single phone uncle has no idea what's going on in this space perception of reality?
Immensely so, immensely different, and an accelerated, exasperated pace post COVID, especially. So
Right.
during COVID, right, we all vowed that we would never do this again. We're like, this is amazing. It's just like we're touching grass again, and we're doing all these unstructured things, ourselves included. We had the best time. We were like jumping in the trampoline with horrible times, of course. But in the grand scheme of things, promises were made, aha moments were had. The second registrations were open, not only did we run to the lines to register, we like prepaid in full for seasons in. I do not know why that happened. It just was observed and lived experience where I'm like, wow, we're swinging all the way back threefold. Now, I'll even generationally speak to the differences between my oldest, who's 14,
Hmm.
to 7. In the span of those 7 years, they've participated in the same programming, pretty much came up the same, rec systems, and then they started to kind of transition into club. We wouldn't have even fathomed to have taken on a club soccer team for my oldest, especially since swim was always kind of like this anchoring activity until she was in middle school. Hi, my 7-year-old is being recruited for a travel team right now. Sorry,
Whoa.
travel right now. She's being recruited for a club team. Why? Because she's a sibling of my middle child. And then for the free for the little siblings, they offer free little clinics. Oh, come kick the ball around. Let's just see what's going on. They like, they kind of get you. It's a business ultimately. But at the end of the day,
100%.
I've seen this trend where I'm like, whoa, and we say yes to things. Firstly, because we now already know what to expect. So they're seeing second, third generation sports parents. And they're like, okay, you're kind of used to the pace. You understand what this is all about. This is not going to be a shock and awe to the system. we're more likely to say yes. And we're definitely guilty of that because, yes, we know the team, we know that the league and the coaches and so forth. And so we kind of know what we're getting into. But that I think comes back full circle is that the reason that we say yes more is because we have a system of support. We already have the lay of the land. We understand that carpool is king, and a lifeline at that. We understand what it's like to work with others and also kind of feed dinners at 4:30, at 7, and 9 o'clock, and that doesn't feel as painful as it once did. It's just the norm. So getting into the swing of things, but also recognizing that those pressures are accelerating and are happening sooner and sooner is an absolute observable, measurable, and I'm sure, reportable trend across the board.
Well, so for my siblings, Michelle, Matthew, listen to this,
Yeah.
learn something from
Agreed.
it. Even though my nephew Felix is like 2.5, my godson Elliot's like 14 months or so. I feel like the way that they've explained it and every other parent explained it, once you have the kids, the time literally flies by and all of a sudden, they're a certain age, maybe high school or college. So this is just great, even from the awareness perspective for those families who are not yet in it. It's like, hey, this is what's happening as a trend across the board. Now, from the like tools applications perspective, you mentioned that before starting Orgo or just data disparate systems, different calendars, etc. Again, going juxtaposed back when I was doing this, I don't think email was yet very popular. I think it was still phone tree, like written paper. Here's the phone tree. Here's who you call. And again, there wasn't so much extensive travel. So prior to starting this, like what is the typical maybe tech stack for a family of managing all this? Because it sounds overwhelming. And I'm someone that's been raised in technology and worked with technology.
Yeah, likewise. And as someone who's inviting technology very intimately into my home and was looking for solutions that in this case I was not able to find. So the typical tech stack, and it varies depending on age and speed of life, but there's those that you choose and there's those that choose you. The things that we choose are like, well, I really like Outlook. I really like Google Calendar. Oh, I like Apple. Some choose skylights, some choose, wonderful tools that are kind of built specifically for the family home. The ones that we don't, the ones that come from school, and that is any different, variation of the PDFs and the emails and canvases and all the different flows through that. And then there's the team management tools, the ones that the league and the coaches select. And in the case of the multi sport, multi athlete households like mine is, I don't have a choice of that times three, times three, times three. In other words, for every team, for every sport, for every age that my kid is at, that's a potentially different tool. So now you have a matrix of all the things that are screaming at you that have vital information, skill changes and time changes and all the things that kind of tend to change on a dime back to a change management system, right? From an enterprise perspective, those sources are disparate, fragmented, and not in your control. Hence the chaos. Not only is it that you're busy, I signed up for busy. I didn't sign up for chaos. I didn't sign up for anxiety, for confusion, miscommunication, death by a thousand, text threads. Like I didn't sign up for any of that. And that became the norm. And that is what I question. See, that's the problem with, I think, this conversation at large, and especially as I kind of build in public and I have it in
Hmm.
different forums, is that it's too easy to attack the fact that like, oh, the kids are overscheduled. Okay, that's a family decision, highly personal. But to the extent that we sign up for these things, I didn't sign up for all the chaos and the mismanagement tools and everything else, but I find myself a part of it. That's the part that we're trying to affect in some small way in terms of at least centralizing data as it pertains to the disparate team management apps to the extent that we can pull as many of those into our ecosystem via APIs, webhooks, ICS links, native integrations with Apple, you name it. We're trying to build that integrator kind of capability around it, such that data can come in and act as a single source of truth for the family. And that's Google Calendar included and Apple and others as well. Once we bring that in, which we've accomplished, and we do that every day, we level up that data now to logistics and we transform the data because it's not enough to sync. It's not enough to show me that I have a game from 3 to 4 p.m. And any sports parent or any human kind of operating in the real world will laugh at this. It's never 3 to 4 p.m., right? There's travel time, there's early arrival for sports families specifically. It's up to an hour early for warm up. Hockey, probably hour and a half with with the gear and everything else in the locker room. It's the preparation. We don't just fly out of the house on the ready. We got to have our panic attack of trying to find the right uniform and the right socks to match. all of that, what we call parent math, which is T minus calculations of backing into a timed event, but all the bits and pieces that take us, to kind of get there. So we represent time fully and accurately, end to end, with the prep, the travel, the early arrival, the core end to end of the event itself, and the travel time back. And we overlay carpool drivers. Who's doing the driving? This is Lifeline. If you think that I can manage 4 activities per night, like, it's crazy. It's because I got people coming and going. It's a revolving door. People are in text threads and WhatsApp groups and spreadsheets just to keep track of who's all doing what for whom. We do not have a change management system otherwise. So Orgo serves as that. When change happens, it's actually satisfying. I'd love to kind of update who the driver is next Tuesday because we just had that chat. I have a place where that is kept. It's a source of record. My mental state is now healthy. I know exactly where that is. And if to the extent that has to change, I know exactly where that needs to happen. Enterprise 101, right? Single source of truth. And obviously applying, any of the standardization around that data. For that, we need to have data architecture. We need to have a backend. We need to have integration layer. That's not AI. That's not vibe coding. So our platform
Yeah.
is hard and fast, tech that we've refactored already once because technology moves fast and we want to move with it. We use AI tools in the back end to operationalize and optimize our internal practices, but that's not outwardly customer facing AI forward capability. We just introduced voice. That was the first thing that's been powered outwardly by AI, only because it makes sense on top of the
Right.
foundation we already built.
There's a lot there to unpack. So, and I want to make sure I hit on especially the high notes. So, I guess firstly, like I mentioned kind of in the beginning with respect to the intro and the outcome, this conversation's a little bit different, air quotes different than prior episodes where those are focused on maybe performance. And so how do performance directors track the player data to make decisions on are they fit? Do they need to recover more? Maybe from the player's perspective in terms of context and their mindset. There'll be a future episode with a clinician who will talk about the youth athletes' mindset and why this is very important from my
Hmm.
perspective, maybe more important than some of these measurables that these scouts and coaches are looking at. Because if you don't have it between the ears, then sorry, nothing else necessarily matters. And so with this topic, it's still within the overarching theme of data in sports. And I've intentionally kept these conversations as broad as possible and will probably continue to do so because it shows a couple things. One, how complex is this broader sports ecosystem? Two, the part that I very much like, just from my own world working experience, is the data aspect because people usually, especially lately, just jump right to AI. They don't want to talk about data management, data governance, interrogating the data to make sure that it's actually doing what you need it to do. All the air quotes boring stuff, which is super foundational. And also, we can take another lesson from someone who has left, or as you said, voted yourself off the island of corporate land to do something that you're very passionate about and serve a very specific need that, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking everyone has this sort of challenge. And just in general, someone who doesn't have kids, like I mentioned, my life feels more chaotic. And I feel that I do a decent job doing my time blocking and scheduling those as you were speaking to like the my words, not necessarily yours, time to game, like to
Mm.
work
Yep.
backwards. It's like
Minus.
I had a meeting this morning down the street 2 miles to BU Medical, and I was like, I have to plan the time to get out, to get there, walk through security, sign in, make sure that I get to the elevator on time, find the right place. I did none of that until the very end. I was like, oh, I could have done a much better job.
Yeah,
So it's
or
like,
visualize that in a way that was much more planful. And for us too, we send notifications that guide each step of the way. It's time to start preparing. It's time to start driving or walking or whatever transportation is. And what that does is it starts to context switch you in all of the
right.
right ways. So you and I can be perfectly present, not paranoid about what's next. And there's some other thing in the background that's kind of doing that T minus work for you. And that, yes, that's 100% a universal issue. My co founder is a single guy living in the city. He's like, I can't wait till every single one of my friends has this thing because when we go to brunch or, lunch and dinner, everybody's late. He's the only one who's on time. There's a universality to
Yes.
this whole time literacy thing, which I think is worthy of kind of coming back full circle to what we mentioned at the top of the call to really understand what time literacy means. And it may be individualized to each person and each age group, but we feel so passionate about this topic that we trademarked it. So time literacy, TM, is something that we're waiting for the US Patent Office to get back to us on, but in active processing. So time literacy, it's like financial literacy. We're not born with it, but it is a formula to success, executive skills, and just kind of the way that we traverse the world. And especially so, I made this comment earlier, offline with you, is that young athletes have an unfair advantage of developing time literacy and this executive skill perhaps above others, in that so much of what they do or are expected to do is time based. They have to be places directly or indirectly. Now, of course, much of that is subject to, the parents doing the bulk of that
Right.
part. But I would argue that every young athlete, my kids included, starting at 6 years old, my youngest one had Orgo on her little tiny little phone, our little watch last year when we were first kind of testing around. And she would receive as early as then notifications that said, it's time to start preparing for swim. She would go and she would start pack her swim bag and she would stand at the door ready to be picked up by corporal. I tell this story often because it's her part in owning this portion of the journey, and this is her day. So we say, own your day. And the older they get, God knows, especially the teenagers who are like these momos, who are like walking around, zombies with digital devices in their hands all day. It's like, this is how you traverse the real world. This is how you function as an adult, soon to be adult, but also as, a contributing member to your family and society. And so what that's happened in my household is that now everybody's learning time literacy and what is expected of them and how to kind of back into these timed commitments. And then we're working together as a team. It starts in the home. We're on the same page. I'm not the enemy. Yes, I'll bark a couple times extra to say it's time. You got the invite, right? Or you got the notification. It's time to start preparing. But we're all on the same page. It's not like shock and awe. And so to the extent that we can all leave the house in tandem with the same goal in hand, guess what starts to happen? Because I know you start to kind of think about, performance and mental performance and stuff. You're in the right headspace. Now you're not anxious. Now you're not flustered as both the parent and, more importantly, the player. The way that I have seen my kids enter the car with the confidence, firstly, that they know mom is going to the right place and dad is showing up at the right time, right? So now we're kind of entrusting those that hold our fate, but then they show up and they are more present. You didn't have the crazy chaos that surrounded leaving wrongly or, not having enough time to prepare and having that shit moment. So it all comes downstream, and the way they show up ultimately to that game, practice, etc., is mental performance, and time literacy, I think, has a big component to do with that.
Yes, was just playing back memories of myself as a kid in the car going to practice or the game, and the not so fun
Mm,
atmosphere was there, and then the role that played on my own mindset, and even now today as an adult, when you have these sort of situations that happen, because again, like we're all people, we humans make communication very difficult, and if we have additional external factors as stressors in our lives, it just further contributes. And so you alluded to this notion of what you call the home team from the parental perspective. Though, can you just speak more to this and elaborate on it a little bit further? Maybe even giving some advice to parents of like the framework or concept, because when you and I, and very briefly, spoke last week, because I'd said, here's a structure, here's how we typically do it. Your feedback was, I prefer no script if that's cool. And I said that is cool, because these episodes are not scripted. We have a general structure we'd like to follow to make sure that everyone's prepared. We can have the discussion. But I was like, you know what? Let's try it. Why not? Though I do want to like touch on this as a specific section, as the idea of the home team, because many of these families that have young athletes like already have this concept of like the team,
yeah.
right? And perhaps they often miss the most critical part, which is their own team, like you've said a few times. So can you just speak more to that as a parent? So from your own experience in your own family, and even like what the feedback you might have received already from other families who
Mhm.
have been using Orgo or taken this approach of like, hey, we are collectively a unit here, going for the same outcomes. Let's manage our time better.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you kind of circling back to that. Absolutely important and at the genesis of the true pain point and aha moment that I had before Orgo was birthed. Yes, it's chaotic. Yes, it's painful, but it's the feeling of the disparity in the home that really drove me to kind of start asking questions of why we were not acting as a team. First and foremost, like in any organization, the home being one of them, tone at the top. I solely believe in that for any leadership, and tone at the top for the home are the parents. My husband and I were not on the same page. Both working parents, both demanding jobs, not dissimilar to what most households look like today. So we've got these commitments. We're trying to do our best. At that point, we were not having any in-home help. The kids were much older. There's no babysitters around. Like, it truly is on us plus carpools, etc. And we were not acting like a team. The kids saw that. So there is friction between the two partners. And so for us, first and foremost, like, how do we get on the same page to make sure that we're reading off the same script and allocating to one another roles and, and parts where, like, not any one of us is doing more than the other to the extent that jobs can permit. That's a big topic in the home, is equality, the distribution of layer of labor, making sure that things feel equitable, right? It's not mom's job. And this is what I love about sports
Mm.
families, if I may generalize, again, very specific to some, but at large, I would say if you're living the sports family lifestyle, for the most part, it's like all hands on deck. Dad's coaching, mom's driving. Mom's coaching, dad's driving. Everyone's pitching into the carpools because it's just that busy. It requires that much involvement. So if we're already doing that thing, what can make us do it better? What is it that we were missing? So the death by 1,000 texts that I mentioned earlier was primarily between my husband and I. We were asking each other the same questions over and over again. Do you got it or do I got it? Are you driving or am I? It's just friction. It's hard enough as is, but that was such a negative thing. So now the kids see that confusion, right? Like, they kind of are looking around and like, wow, mom and dad are not really having a great time. And the way that we arrive at the game or practice is already so stressful or feels so heightened. It doesn't feel good for me either. So tone at the top. We're on the same page. They see us kind of reinforcing each other's messaging of like, this is a team. We all have a part in it. Let's kind of work cleanly together. And then to the extent on the weekends, which happens literally every single weekend, he goes left, I go right. We cover the state, depending on the various handoffs. This happens all the time. We have clarity. You got this. I got that. See you in the evening. Talk to you in between. Let us know how the games are going. So there's that cohesion and it just feels good and it's easier. And so that's what we hear similarly from families. It's like keeping families happily married or couples or keeping them happily divorced, depending on,
What they
if they
want.
talk to each other, that's fine too. You have all the information that you need, same side of the same coin there. But yeah, I mean, that's really kind of the genesis, is just like remove the friction, communicate more seamlessly, have the information that you need to have that clarity and confidence, and reinforce that down into the kids. And now once the expectation is modeled between the parents, then the kids start to kind of, plug into that same formula.
That's just amazing. I mean, we often in these episodes go into the data part of it, which is like the core. And oftentimes, especially in sport, it's like everything but. It's like, how do you work with people? How do you persuade them if you want to
The
take a
people.
decision with the organization? It ends up being the people. Like, sports is a human based business. There's a reason why staff oftentimes is called human performance.
Mm,
And when we think of the younger athletes, like the family, to your point, is part of that team. And at least from my experience, and I understand others go through this, with the caveat that there are those folks who do not like the sports analogies, especially in the workplace.
sure.
Like I can see why. I'm just speaking through similarly to what you said, my own lived experience, where there is so much benefit that you as a person can get from playing team sports. I didn't really do the individual. There's benefits there too. The team sport component that are lessons for life, where you get lessons for
Absolutely.
life. Oftentimes you get friends for life, those relationships for life. And therefore, in the career arc of an athlete, these are very critical times. And it is getting so much more complex. So there's just so much goodness there. And I am now very confident that future Mike, meaning
Mm,
me, when
mm.
he has a family, will be very suited to manage the chaos, even embrace it, because I will now think of this as like an operations problem,
It
right?
is.
It's math. That's what I wanted to say earlier. Is with sport we think about, and data we think about performance or the business, and oftentimes like how does stuff get done, or in what order does it get done. So the
Order
ops
of
goes
operation.
yeah, goes overlooked, and that is the critical path to make it happen, right? It's the execution part of it. So this
Absolutely. This is
this
execution leg of the equation all day long.
yes, and I'm a big fan also of the notion of like what's the critical path, and
Mhm.
adjacent to that, like what's the order of operations, what's the right
Always.
order that we should be doing things. Because when we think about like the families, and like you said, you have three, and it's multiple sports. It's not just one to the power of whatever, it's then three, which makes it more complex. So it's like, how do we help unwind that so that we can enjoy it, or parents can enjoy it, the kids can enjoy it, and it delivers on the experience that I believe it's meant to, in terms of shaping them as all of us as people and
100%.
humans. So before we go into the what is the only named segment, which is behind the data, is there or are there any like high notes of key advice or tips that you would give to parents where if they took nothing else from this conversation, which I hope they take a lot from it, but if they take nothing else, what are the one or two leave behinds you can give them from a tips or advice perspective on what they should consider doing if they're not doing it already?
Yeah, so I'm going to bring it back to my kind of enterprise brain, but also data related. So, two outcomes that we're hoping to achieve by way of Orgo: decision making platform and a change management platform. That is something that is so core to the order of operations in our day to day life, whether we realize it or not. The decisioning piece comes from having the data at our fingertips. The data in this case is: here's my day fully, here are all the details that are behind it, here are the conflicts and the overlaps where two people cannot be at the same time, either as participants or drivers. And the decision comes from, in my perspective, of saying no to things, because every night we decline something. Every night we make a concession on one or two commitments that are just not possible. It's based on many other factors regarding weather, how many times we've gone to swim versus, soccer that week, or, et cetera. But to have the data at our fingertips and inform the decisions that we inevitably have to make is like priority number one. Number two is change management. So again, we talked about like change is constant, right? There's going to be a rain delay, there's going to be time changes, there's going to be sicknesses, absences. Where does that change get administered? The mental load that often is because we keep everything up here. It doesn't have a place. The second it has a home, it's out of my mind. And to the extent that it has to change, no biggie. I will literally take 2 seconds, go and make that update. A notification will go out, inform my husband that that change has been made. To the extent that it affects him or anybody else involved, it's done. So, data decision making as well as change management are like the two things that we'd love to be able to facilitate more so at the technical level with this solution. And all the funny, all the emotional stuff and all this stuff. But like
Yeah.
technically speaking, those are the two pillars.
And that's where data is very powerful. Technology can be very powerful, like you saw in the enterprise days in banking and FinServe, in terms of using it to take decisions. Again, oftentimes, depending on the sector of the bank, it could be like anti-money laundering, like AML
Absolutely.
checks, where it's like thousands of transactions happening, right? It's how do you make it simple? I did not intend for that to be an analogy, but it's pretty analogous in terms of what parents go through.
I borrow from, and then from a business perspective, fintechs, the reason fintechs exist is because they're specialists. So we emulate that. If you notice, I'm not talking about a bazillion different tentacles coming off of this octopus, a feature XYZ. People ask us for all sorts of things. We're keeping on a very particular path. That path is logistics outside the home, to the extent that it deals with all the different, touch points along this journey. And everything else is a little bit of a blinders on. So the fintech analogy here also, is kind of similar in terms of remaining a specialist within a highly generalist world and start to serve as an extension of that value set.
For sure. And then lastly, a piece of advice I could give to folks, just from my observation and briefly talking about speaking with you when we were discussing, like, hey, would you be interested? What could we talk about? I look at you as like a model citizen also for people in the career workforce who may be somewhere for 10 years, 20 years longer, and they might feel stuck, right? They
Mm,
might feel like, no, I need to stay here, even though they're more than capable of solving other real world problems. The data, tools, technology are available to them. And it also shows from that perspective that, like, hey, it doesn't matter how long you've been somewhere doing something, you can always pivot, especially, and it's kind of where I started, especially if you deeply understand a problem,
mhm.
you are more likely to be able to solve it. So that is some, I believe, inspiration for others, is use Zoya as a model of someone who is in a very legacy industry, right? Very complex, to break, just be like, I'm done with this. I am moving on and solving problems that every household probably goes through. So I just wanted to add that in too, because as I was thinking through this, I went back to the initial conversation thinking like other people can do this. Like, and I say that for folks in terms of what I'm doing too. Like, if I can do what I'm doing right now, they can too. And I believe that it's very similar, that they have the tools available to them, and they can find great people too to help them along the way. And I think that's what we need more of in the world in general. To be a little philosophical, is like people help people and solve these real challenges and problems that exist, because otherwise, what's the point of doing anything if our lives are so chaotic, if they're so stressed out, like that the other topics don't necessarily matter. So I just wanted
Yep.
to add that in.
Appreciate that. Very nice.
It's my pleasure. So last but not least, I was initially planning to say like this was a very serious topic. We didn't have so much fun today. Though as we talked through, like we did have fun. Spoke to in a lighthearted way, even though this is something that it can challenge families, right, and can strain them, as you spoke to your own experience in the past and taking the decision to start Orgo about 2 years ago. So we started, as we do with every guest, with you in terms of your background. What's driving your point of view. I like to finish with going behind the data, as they say, to learn about, in this case, Zoya the person. So people can get a sense of like your interests, what are the things that you like, so that they can also gain inspiration and say like, hey, I am like her. We have similar interests. Like, that's really cool. Why don't I think of something, or why don't I do something, or why don't I connect with her or connect with people like her? Because that
Yeah,
is
please do.
that's another component of all this. Is I try to connect episodes together and connect people together, because there's so many people doing great things, and the way I frame these questions, I believe, helps reveal our similarities, even if we like look different than other people, come from different backgrounds, what have you. So 4 rapid fire kind of questions. First being, is there a place or location that is special to you or close to your heart? And if you want to share why, please share why.
Okay. Brighton first in Brooklyn, New York is where I touched down in 1992. Excuse me, June 26th, if I'm not mistaken. With $8 in our pocket. My mom and I came here from the Ukraine. I was 9 years old, and $8 is the price of cab fare between JFK and said address. So that was a formidable memory, and I've had about 3 years or so that I spent in that area, and just something about the juxtaposition of early '90s, the culture, the music, the naivete, the complete cluelessness of like touching down in this completely crazy world without any frame of reference or cultural norms in mind is definitely what I recall, but also living at the beach, directly across the street from the beach within a city setting and having the subway directly overhead. And I can go on, but like that particular address, as I, return to it every couple of years, is always full of those memories.
That's amazing. I am parent, a child of 2 immigrants from Poland, and they came in the like 70s, 80s, and the way they spoke about what they came with and didn't have,
Mm-hmm.
it makes me really appreciative for how lucky I am to be born here and have them as parents. And I'm sure your children, your daughters, if they don't see it yet, they will. We all do at some point, but that
Might
is,
have to remind them, but yes.
yeah, they will at some point. It'll be very crystal clear, as it has for me. So thank you for that. I might now try to guess in my mind of what you might answer in terms of the next question. So is there a comfort food that you have, or something that's like a go-to that gives you a good feel, whether it's homemade or from a restaurant?
No, it's definitely not pierogies, although I will say there's definitely fun memories there. I love sushi. But what's been comforting me as of late, especially on the founder diet that we were just talking about,
Yes.
so malnutritioned, it's terrible. I could be having the worst day, but if there's a Haagen-Dazs matcha ice cream, the day is ending on a high note. And I actually killed one last night. Like we literally split and just share and like watch 90 Day Fiance at like midnight as my day is wrapping. That is my guilty pleasure. Zero nutritional value, 100% joy.
That's okay. No, yeah, it's not about the healthy. And some folks will say, well, this might be a weird one. And to me, it's always like, no, because it's your answer. It's what was special to you and what you appreciate. So yes, I was going to guess pierogi, or just like Darcy Norman in the first one. I actually thought his family was Polish, but he's like, no, in up in Grand Prairie, Alberta, there was a lot of Ukrainians and immigrants from different countries, and that's just something that my mom made. So
Food is good food. Yeah.
I'm literally 0 for 3 with guests, thinking that they're about to say pierogi, whether it's from like Ukrainian or Polish. So I will stop guessing that. And I'm gonna finish with I'm gonna go a little bit different order than normal. Is there a book that you've read in the last year or two that's had an impact on you or taught you a lesson that you want to share with others?
Yes, I would show it, but it's always on loan. I lend this thing out with my notes, and I always invite others to kind of make sticky notes around it as well to gain their perspective. But the courage to be disliked is life changing. And I've had multiple people that have come to me and been like, thank you so much for recommending it. It has altered my mentality and my outlook, especially at a given age or stage in our careers in life. And it's written by a Japanese philosopher, but it's set as a dialogue between an apprentice and a philosopher. And so there's just like this really healthy debate that's happening. It's conversational, it's fun, it's esoteric, it's a challenger. And I'm definitely one who definitely has the courage to be disliked. And I wear that very proudly because if you stand for nothing, then, and so
I'm with
certain
you.
things I stand for, I welcome that clearly to be, disagreed with. But yes, it was I would say, an unlock of a read because it substantiated so much of my personally held beliefs. And it was just nice to see that in written form. So courage to be disliked.
Awesome. I will put that in the notes, and then even though I could have listened to the recording, I still wrote it down anyways because
Yeah.
I want to order that right away
Right.
and add it to the reading list. Okay, last but not least, is there a song that puts you in a mood or gets you pumped up or gets you excited or gets you focused? What is it?
Yeah, I heard it this morning, which was such a crazy sign. Sarah McLachlan's Silence, but also remixed to like whatever like latest DJ. I'm such an EDM head. This is like taking me back to my early like club days. It's in the city. It's early 2000s. Obviously the best musical era between that and the 90s. So that just throws me to like early college. It's emotional, it's like instrumental, it's dance, it's all of it. So Sarah McLachlan's Silence, but remixed.
I think I know what this is. So this is
Yeah, you must.
I'm gonna listen right after.
Just it'll pull you. It'll pull you in ways, and I think it has, one of those universal effects.
This is the one that I think Tiesto has a really known
They
version.
all
I
have had a
think. Okay,
well,
okay.
as it's just so good, and, like, not much else has been developed better, to be honest, so you gotta work with what
Hey,
we've got.
yeah, Tiesto came out in 1999, like you said, good, very good era of music. Okay, Zoya Lehrer, thank you so much for taking the time. This has been a lot of fun, a great pleasure. I have learned a ton, and I really hope that others do too. So thank you again.
Thank you. Pleasure.